Today's episode is going to be based off of one of the most powerful coaching conversations I've ever had. And it happened just 2 weeks ago, and it was a client of mine. He's in his 50s. And I simply asked him this question: when was the last time that you felt like you were enough? And he sat there for a moment, and he said, honestly, Mitch, I can't remember. 50 years. And you know what? The truth is, most men I talk to don't feel like enough. Not as husbands, not as fathers, not even as men, not as providers. And the most dangerous part, they don't know why they don't feel enough. So they do what high performers do. They work harder, they push harder, they achieve more. And somehow, it still doesn't fix what's happening on the inside. Because you see, the problem isn't your income. It's not your schedule. It's not even your marriage. It's something deeper, something older, something that started long before you became a husband or a father. And if you don't deal with it, you won't just live with it, you'll pass it on to your kids. And so today I'm going to share parts of my story that I've rarely ever talked about publicly, some of the darkest moments from my childhood. And I'm going to show you the difference between the two kinds of men that I believe there are. Number one, the men which are the walking wounded. And number two, the forged man. And by the end of this episode, I'm going to give you 3 questions that could completely change the way you show up in your marriage, in your business, and in your home. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, the place where high-performing men are empowered to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness while enhancing their career success. You see, in a world full of noise, burnout, and mediocrity, we believe what's missing is courageous and compassionate leadership in the home, because when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. You see, this isn't just a podcast. It's a movement for men who refuse to settle for less in their families, in their focus, and their future. We are curse breakers and we are legacy makers. I am your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I'm honored that you've chosen to invest your most valuable asset, which is your time, with me today. Now let's get into it. All right, welcome back to the Dad Nation podcast. All right, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me waving my arm. I'm showing you this bicep brace I have on right now. Look at this. Isn't it crazy looking? Look like a Terminator. I'm almost 3 weeks post-surgery, got fitted with this bicep brace, which makes me look like a bionic man. And actually, you know what? When I was getting fitted with the brace, I was talking to my surgeon. I'm like, hey, man, could you hook me up with one of those for my right arm too? It looks pretty bad, man. Like, I'll take 2. Anyways, thank you for your messages. Thank you for reaching out. I'm doing well. My wife is about to pop, literally. She's doing 2 weeks and expecting our second baby boy. And we're thrilled and excited about this new season. But however, we're not here to talk about me. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about me, but we are here to talk about you and some of the things that we experience collectively as men. And so, without further ado, I'm going to stop talking about my arm and I'm going to start talking about us, all right? Because if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you know I say this all the time. You can be winning at work and quietly losing at home. It's very possible. It's actually very common. You can be respected in the boardroom but completely misunderstood in your marriage. You're solving problems all day, but when it comes to connection, when it comes to emotions, when it comes to leadership at home, it feels like you're guessing. You ever felt that way? I know I have. And if you're honest, that there's that quiet voice in the back of your mind that says, man, I should be better than this. I should have this figured out by now. I don't know why this feels so hard. And most guys, they never say it out loud. They just carry it. They numb it. They choke it down. They bury it in work and distraction or silence. But today we're going to bring it to the surface, all right? And let me start with sharing a little bit of my story. Because if you've been listening for a while, you would have heard some of my story and how I almost blew my life up 3 years into marriage. But for me, it didn't start in my marriage. It started way, way earlier, right? When I was a boy, when I was a young boy. I remember being a young boy, 6, 7, 8 years old, laying in bed at night, hearing my mom leave the house because she was driving to the pub to pick up my dad again. And I lay there listening. waiting for them to come home. But when they did, I could hear them fighting through the walls. And I can remember that rage building inside of me as a kid. And that's what was happening internally. Not sadness at first, it was anger. It was confusion. It was hopelessness. I remember as a 7-year-old boy thinking, I'm going to do whatever I can do when I grow up to help other boys never have to hear and experience some of these things. And then there were other moments, there was hockey, for example. Hockey's a big thing in the hometown where I'm from. And, I started playing hockey because I thought, well, my dad likes hockey, right? So if I do this, maybe he'll notice me. Maybe he'll come to maybe he'll come to the games. Maybe I'll get his attention. Maybe I'll get his approval. But he never came. Right, to the games, not to the father-son games. I remember sitting in the locker room watching, and we would have these father-son games, and I'd be watching the fathers, kneeling down to tie up their boys' skates, helping them get ready, and my coach would always be the one to come over and tie mine, and I'd sit there, embarrassed. Right? I'd be ashamed, and some other kids would be asking, "Hey, where's your dad?" Right, so I got really good at making excuses at a young age. But that pattern didn't stop there. Over the coming years growing up, regularly seeing the police show up at the house was a common thing. I remember my sister got taken away. She had been charged with grand theft auto, and I found out about it through reading through the newspaper. The anger, as a young boy, I remember driving around with my sister trying to find, my father one point during one of his disappearances, not knowing if he left or if he was just on a bender for a few days or if he was alive or not. I mean, it was difficult. And there is so much more, but I could, just for the sake of time, we'll leave it there. Now, why do I share all that? Because I didn't realize it at the time, but all of that was shaping everything. That was shaping how I saw myself, how I loved myself, how I thought I was deserving of respect, my confidence, how I showed up as a boy, as a teenager. And it truly shaped how I defined what it meant to be a man. And y'all know my story. A lot of you would. I mean, like I said, I thought I dealt with all that, but I got married and 3 years into marriage, my wounds began to bleed all into my wife, all over my family situation, and I almost lost it all. And when eventually I turned my life around and, all that stuff, and that was years ago, 10 years ago, and I've helped men along the way. You know what I've learned along the way? That there are a lot of men walking around today who are successful on the outside, but internally, they're still carrying wounds that they never chose. See it all the time, every single day. And I call this kind of guy the walking wounded. All right, this is the man who is reactive instead of grounded. Because he's not secure in who he is. He's triggered instead of intentional. He's driven, but he's never satisfied. He compares constantly. He oscillates between I'm not enough and I'll prove that I am. You ever been there? I lived there for many years. He oscillates between I'm not enough and I'll prove that I am. And what happens? Like I said, he starts bleeding on the people around him, on his wife, his kids, his team at work, his business. Not because he's a bad man, but because he's a wounded one. This was me for the first 30 years of my life. And here's the truth most men don't want to face. Unhealed wounds do not disappear. They show up in your reactions. They bleed out in your tone. Trust me, they'll find a way to come out to the surface in your distance, in your silence. Either way, you're going to bleed out. And the people you love most are going to pay for it. And this isn't just my opinion or my lived experience. I mean, although that's all anecdotal, but there's a reason for this. Research consistently shows that fatherlessness is tied to higher rates of depression, higher rates of incarceration, lower rates of self-worth. But here's what matters even more than statistics, which was the focal point of my coaching session with this client, is this, that every boy grows up asking two key questions. Number one, am I enough? Am I enough? The second question he asks is, do I have what it takes? Will I have what it takes? And if those two questions, am I enough? Do I have what it takes? If they do not get answered by your father, you will spend the rest of your life trying to answer them yourself. You're going to look for those answers everywhere else in the world, in women, in drugs, in alcohol, in business accomplishments, in striving and exhausting yourself through success, through validation, through achievement, trying to answer those two questions. But here's the problem. Success doesn't heal your identity. You can build a business and still feel like a fraud. You can provide for your family and still feel disconnected. Because this isn't a performance issue, it's an identity issue. And that question, that hole gets answered, that gets filled by the masculine role in your life as a child. It's crazy. I mean, your mother can kind of do it, and friends can kind of do it, but a boy who does not have those questions answered by his father will grow up to continuously be looking to all kinds of different areas to answer those two questions. How do I know this? Well, the research shows it. I lived it. I've coached several men through it. And like I said, this entire coaching session was about these two questions that were never answered for him. Now, why is that so important? Because if you don't deal with it, it doesn't stop with you, right? If you don't transform your pain, you will transmit it. Let me say that again. If you don't transform your pain, you will transmit it. And you're going to transmit it to your kids who can't handle that kind of pain or pressure. Their minds, their hearts, their security, their confidence cannot handle that. Okay? So we got to transform that pain. We got to lean into our identity. We got to have those questions answered. So before we get too far, I'm just going to give you one reflection question. And it's this. I want you to lean in. What pain from your past is still quietly shaping the way you show up today as a husband, as a father, or a man? Let me ask it again. What pain from your past is still quietly shaping the way you show up today as a husband, or a father, or a man? So you track your numbers in business, your revenue, your performance, KPIs, and you know exactly where you stand. But let me ask you this. Do you know the score in your marriage, or are you just hoping it's fine? Because you know what? Most men have no idea. They don't check until something breaks, until the distance is obvious, until the tension turns into silence, until the word separation enters the conversation. And by then, they're playing catch up. And that's exactly why I built the High Performance Husband Audit. It's a free 2-minute diagnostic designed specifically for driven men like you to give you a clear, honest read on where your marriage actually stands. No fluff, no therapy talk, just 10 strategic multiple choice questions, a clear category, and a proven system to help you fix what's off before it becomes something bigger. Because if you're disciplined enough to track your business, you should be disciplined enough to lead your home. So go to the link in the show notes and take the High Performance Husband Audit today. Get your score, get your plan, and start leading where it matters most. All right, let's get back to the episode. Now, that's been heavy, but here's the deal. Here's the good news, my friend. There's another path, another type of man. The man who doesn't run from the pain, but he's shaped by it. He doesn't run from the pain, he's shaped by it. I call him the forged man. This is the man who faces his past, who takes ownership, who builds discipline. He doesn't eliminate his wounds, he masters them. And he understands this key principle. Pain is not the separator, the response is. Because here's the thing, every man goes through fire. You have to go through fire. But the challenging thing is not every man is forged by it. Some men are hardened by pain. And some men are destroyed by it. And some allow it to transform them. So I'm going to talk about the forging process because I think it's a powerful analogy to how we ought to live as men, as husbands, as fathers. There's 3 parts to the forging process. There's the fire, there's the pressure, and then there's the formation. So let's start with the fire. This is the pain. The fire is the wound, the initial thing, right? This is the hardship. This is the breaking point. And for some men, for a lot of men, it starts in their childhood. It's an absent father. It's chaos in the home. It's feeling unseen or unwanted. But for others, it might come later. It's marriage struggles, business failures, burnout, death, loss, right? But every man experiences pain. The question is, what do you do with it? Because remember, avoided pain doesn't disappear. It leaks into your marriage, your reactions, your parenting. The second step to the forging process is the pressure. Okay? And the pressure is facing the truth and taking ownership. This is where transformation begins. This is where a man stops blaming everyone else and starts asking himself, what part of this is mine to handle? He realizes my anger did not start today when my kid threw the pudding across the floor, or when he had that tantrum, or when my wife said that snarky comment that set me up. Or he realizes my shutdown isn't just stress. These reactions are coming from somewhere deeper. But the problem is we don't like pressure, right? Of course, nobody likes pressure. Pressure is uncomfortable because it requires ownership. It requires doing things like apologizing first, or having the hard conversations, or doing the deep work to gain control of your emotions, or getting support instead of pretending you're fine. Whoa, somebody needed to hear that one. Getting support instead of just pretending you're fine. You see, most men avoid this stage. I talk to men every single day who are avoiding this stage. They are aware of the truth, they're aware of the fire, but they don't want to face the pressure. Here's the thing. Coal breaks under pressure. Steel is formed by it. What are you? Are you coal or are you steel? All right, moving on. So the third step to the forging process is what I call formation. This is discipline and identity. Formation is where a man rebuilds himself intentionally. This is where your pain becomes purpose. This is a beautiful step. It's hard, but it's beautiful. This is where a man develops discipline, consistency, self-control, leadership, integrity. Not because he feels like it, but because he knows who he wants to become. And he's uncompromising in it. He sets standards for himself and for his family. He says, this ends with me. And here's the difference between the wounded man and the forged man. The wounded man says, this is just who I am. I call it Eeyore energy. This is just who I am. Oh, woe is me. But the forged man says, this ends with me. Another thing I hear the wounded man say is, this happened to me. This happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me. I'm a victim. I'm wounded. I got all these wounds. The forged man says something similar, but there's one key difference. There's one word that's different. He does not say this happened to me. He says, this happened for me. You see the difference? What can I learn from this? How can this serve me? How can I come out of this stronger? How can I use this to become more forged? This happened for me, brother. That's the difference. Not perfection, formation. And as I was preparing this episode, I know you need to hear this today. If you don't let this fire forge you, your kids will feel the burn of what you never healed. Let me say that again. If you don't let this fire forge you, your kids will feel the burn of what you never healed. So, I want to give you a question, an identity-based question. And I want you to write this down. And I'm going to walk you through some scenarios where you can ask this question. But the question that changes everything is this. Is this the wounded man reacting? Or is this the forged man responding? Let me ask that one again. Is this the wounded man reacting? Or is this the forged man responding? Now, when do you ask yourself that? Well, you ask yourself that when your wife says something that triggers you and you feel like you're about to snap because deep down you're insecure because you don't really feel like you're that good of a husband. Because maybe you don't really feel like you're that lovable because maybe your dad walked out. Or maybe you feel like you've got to earn your love because you grew up in a performance-based home. And so every time she asks something of you, you feel like you've got to put on a show and you don't like that. You want to ask yourself that question. Is this the wounded man reacting or is this the forged man responding? You want to ask yourself that question when you feel disrespected. You can ask yourself that question when you compare yourself to another man. Hey, I got my hand up. If you're watching on YouTube, I compare myself to men all the time. Ask yourself that question when your kids are pushing your buttons and you're about to snap. Because the wounded man reacts. The forged man responds. The wounded man withdraws. The forged man leads. The wounded man avoids. And a forged man leans in. And brother, this is where it gets real. I've kind of flirted with this a little bit along the way. But if you're listening to this and you are a father, this isn't just about you anymore. Your kids are watching. And your kids are learning. You know what they're learning? They're learning what a man does under pressure. They're learning what a man sounds like when he's frustrated. They're learning what a man believes about himself. They're learning how a man loves and cherishes his bride. They're learning how a man takes care of his body and what he puts into his mouth for fuel. They're learning how a man leads in his faith, in his finances, and in whatever other way you want to fill in this blank with. So, brother, whether you realize it or not, you are handing them a blueprint in all of these scenarios. So the question becomes, what are they inheriting? Because, brother, every family has a pattern. Make no mistake. But not every man breaks it. And this is your moment. If you're a longtime listener to this show, you would have heard me say this a few times before, but I believe in the depths of my being that every family has a curse breaker. Every family has one man who puts a stake in the ground and says, this ends with me. And by God's grace, for me and my family, that's going to be me. And now it's time for you to decide. Are you going to repeat this cycle, or are you going to put an end to it? Will you be the man that breaks that generational cycle? Or will you be a man that just becomes another cog in the wheel of it? All right, this is your moment, right? And if you haven't been paying attention, if you're distracted, I want you to lean in again for me, because I want you to hear this. A man who won't face the fire becomes the fire his family has to survive. But a man who steps into it, who owns it, and is forged by it, becomes a leader his family can rely on. And in one scenario, this guy lights his entire family on fire. And in another scenario, he becomes stronger and protects them from the flame. Listen, brother, you didn't stand at the altar thinking, one day we'll just coexist. But somewhere along the way, you became roommates. Not because you don't love her, not because you don't care, but let's be real, life got busy. Work picked up, kids needed you, stress crept in, and slowly, without even realizing it, the conversations got shorter, the laughter got quieter, the connection got weaker, and now it's logistics, schedules, passing each other in the hallway. And deep down, you know, this isn't what you wanted. But here's the good news. You don't need a massive overhaul to fix this. You just need to start creating connection again, and on purpose. And that's exactly why I created the Roommate Remedy. It's a free guide with 113 simple, practical ways to break the routine and bring the fun, the spark, and the energy you used to have back to your relationship. There's no pressure, no perfection, just small intentional moments that remind you why you chose each other in the first place. So if you're ready to stop coexisting and start actually enjoying your marriage again, head to the link in the show notes and then download the Roommate Remedy for free, my friend. Let's get back into the episode. Now, if you're listening to this and you feel like I'm coming down strong and you're starting to feel like that pressure, like you got to be perfect and you're going to have it all on lock, listen, no. That's not the message I want you to hear, okay? You got to have grace for yourself because you're a human being. So no, your kids don't need a perfect father. In fact, even if it was possible to be perfect, that would also not be a great example because you'd be raising kids that were obsessed with perfectionism, right? They don't need a perfect father, but they do need a present one. They do need a grounded one. They do need a man who's doing the work. Because at the end of the day, they won't remember your meetings. They won't remember your income. But they will feel the man you became. And ultimately, your son will become the man that you became. And your daughter will end up marrying a man that you became. So with that, I have another reflection question for you. All right, this is the second one. This is the last one. And I want you to listen to this one carefully. And I want you to ponder on it. Read it and then leave it for a day. Then read it again. If your son became exactly like you emotionally, would that make you proud, or would you want better for him? Let me ask that again. If your son grew to become exactly like you emotionally, how you respond, how you react, how you deal with stress, pressure, conflict in your marriage, all those things, would that make you proud, or would you want better for him? Now, I acknowledge this episode has been fast and hard. It's been punchy, okay? And so I'm going to leave it there because I've given you a lot to consider. I've given you 2 reflection questions and a question to ask yourself when you feel that pressure coming on, when you feel that tension, when you feel yourself want to lose your cool. So we're going to wrap this conversation up because I want you to take some time to think about this week. But if you are listening to this episode, and if this is hitting home, right, this is like lighting a fire in your belly, you're like, man, this I felt, this is exactly how I felt. This gives language to how I felt, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. If that is you, then that's your gut telling you something. It's telling you that you already know that it's time to do something about it. Not by trying harder, right? Not by pushing more, not by working more. We know that doesn't work. But by getting clear, by getting support, by stepping into the man that you are called to be. And that's exactly why I built a high-performance husband accelerator. It's not a therapy, not a bunch of guys sitting around a circle talking about their feelings, not a surface-level advice. It's a proven system. We don't guess, we don't hope. We install systems and frameworks and strategies and get results. It's a brotherhood. It's a place where men like you and me, high-performing, driven, capable, where we learn how to lead at home the same way that we lead in business. So if you are ready to stop living like the walking wounded and start becoming the forged man your family needs, then book a complimentary call with me. It's not going to be any pressure. I'm not going to strong arm you. We're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about where you're at. We're going to talk about what's getting you stuck. And we're going to talk about what life could look like and see if it's a good fit. And if it's not a good fit, we won't work together. But if it is a good fit, we will. Very simple. Worst case scenario is you make a new brother, you get some great advice. Best case scenario, your life changes forever. Sound good? I mean, I think that sounds pretty good. I might be a little bit biased. But listen, as we wrap this up, you are either one of the two. You're either the walking wounded or you've been forged. And the difference is what you choose to do next. Listen, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this episode has been powerful. I hope this episode has been actually slightly uncomfortable for you. I think that's a good thing. I hope this episode has given you a lot to think about. And I hope you're encouraged. And I hope that maybe if you've experienced challenging things growing up like myself and so many millions of other men, that at least there are some things that you have the courage to pull out of the darkness and into the light. Because the moment you do that, the moment you pull that out of the darkness and into the light, it loses its power. Why do I hope that for you? Because when you do that, when you take those steps and you make those moves, it doesn't just change your life. It changes your wife's life, and it changes your kid's life forever. Listen, thank you again so much for tuning in. As always, I am in your corner, my friend. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. My email is mitchell@dadnationco.com. You can check out the website. You can check out my Instagram @dadnationco. Whatever, just Google me, okay? You'll find me. And if you don't reach out, I'm going to see you next week, same time, same place. New episodes every single Monday morning for you. All right? See you next week. Thank you for tuning into the Dad Nation podcast today. Listen, if today's conversation challenged you, if it encouraged you or helped you level up in any area of your life, would you do me a favor? Take 60 seconds to rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. This helps us reach more men who need to hear this message. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Dad Nation YouTube channel, where you're going to find full episodes, clips, and exclusive content designed to help you win at home just like you do at work. Remember, your family does not need perfection. They need your presence. Your leadership matters. So keep showing up, keep leveling up, and never forget, when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. We'll see you next time.